Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we're going to make some Golabki with an Italian mac and cheese, some caramelized carrots and onions, and then we're going to bake up 2 sourdoughs. We've got a Gruyere and black pepper and a cinnamon swirl. So let's start by getting these guys out on our parchment paper, and we'll get ready to score them up and put them in our Dutch ovens. And a little brush over. And then we're going to give a nice kind of score down the middle. And then we'll just do our classic on here. And this has Gruyere and Swiss cheese in it, so it has a little bit of both, but then lots of black pepper. And I found black pepper is just so delicious in sourdough bread. It's not something you would expect, but it is really wonderful. So it adds this little pop to it that is just so lovely. I'm going to put it in our nice and preheated Dutch oven. We'll slide it in there. We'll put our lid on. And then we'll get our next one out. And this is our cinnamon swirl. And we'll give our score. I'm going to do kind of a crisscross here. Let's do on it. And then I think we're just going to keep it pretty simple on this one because that cinnamon swirl, the sugar in there always gets a little bit moist, and I don't like to mess with it too much, or it tends to get a little bit of a leakage on there. So we'll pop that in there. And then we're going to put our lid on. And we'll get these guys in our oven to bake up at 500 for 20 minutes. Then we're going to take our lid off, and then we'll bake them for 20 minutes at 450. So first one in. Now let's go grab our second one. And with the Dutch ovens, you want to make sure they are preheated and nice and hot and toasty when you put them in there. It kind of creates a nice steamy environment. And that way you don't have to add in any extra liquid or moisture. The Dutch oven traps that moisture in. Okay. I'm going to set my timer here for 20 minutes. And now let's get started on the Golabki. Okay. We've got our water boiling here to drop in our cabbage, which we're going to be kind of boiling off our leaves for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cut down here. And we're going to take off our cabbage leaves very delicately. And you don't want to try to break them because we're going to be wrapping them up. And then we're going to boil them for a little bit, which is going to give them a little bit more flexibility when you're wrapping. And this is always something where, so growing up, I was first taught to just like pop the whole cabbage head in the water and then take them off later, which it was always so difficult because I was never patient enough to wait for the cabbage to come down. And then halfway through, your inner part of your cabbage wasn't boiled enough. So you always had to boil it a second time. And now I've worked on where if you kind of cut off bits like this, it works a little bit better, where you just have to be a little bit more delicate so you don't tear them, but you should be able to pull them off, and then they don't need so long to boil. You just have to be very careful in this initial part that you don't break them. Now, once you get to a certain part, you're not going to be able to peel them off, which is, I think we're about to get to that part on it. So we're going to drop these guys in here. I'm going to drop this one in first into our boiling water. But now that I have a good little handle head on it, we should be able to put that in there. We'll let that boil for a little bit, and then we'll drop these in a few minutes as well. We'll let that a good start on the boiling here. And then I'm going to drop my noodles in to start boiling. This is going to be for our mac and cheese that we'll be cooking up as well. We're going to do an Italian mac, so I'm going to be using mozzarella, Asiago, and Parmesan. So just like a really simple one, and we're doing shells on there. But not all of my kids love Golabki. They like the inside, but they don't necessarily love the cabbage part of it. So I always like to make another side that I know that they'll love with it, which is mac and cheese. And it kind of goes well with it. So we'll give this a nice little stir here. Poke this around. And then I'm going to drop these guys in here. You can also use purple cabbage for this, which gives you pretty purple leaves. But we'll let those boil for just a little bit. And while those are boiling, let's make the base that is going to go inside our cabbage. So here I've got about 1.5 cups of rice cooked up. And I've let it cool so that I'm able to work with it. And then we're going to add in 2 pounds of like ground beef. So there's one. And you're going to mix these together. And essentially, I like to do equal parts, essentially rice and ground beef. But you can also go heavier one way or the other, depending on how you like it. Let me go get my hands a quick rinse. Because before we go in here and mix it in here, we are going to add in some spices as well.
You got a comment that you're on early tonight?
We are on early. On Sunday, we typically do slightly earlier dinners because I have my parents come over for it. And so we do like a family dinner on Sunday for them. So a little bit earlier tonight for them. So we've got our 2 pounds of our ground beef in here and about 1.5 cups. So 1.5 cups pre-cooked. So, and then you cook it up and that's your rice for it. So not just 1.5 cups measured after you've cooked it, but 1.5 cups of dry rice cooked. We're going to add in a can of diced tomatoes with juices and everything. I'm going to add in some green onions, which would add a nice little freshness to it. And then we're going to spice it up, and then we're going to really get in there with our hands and really work the mixture together. But we're going to make sure we season it up first and get all of our spices in there. So we're only having to go in there once with our hands. And I said, this is the easy part to, doing it. The more difficult part is really like taking the cabbage and wrapping it up and going in there and working with that. And then we're going to make kind of like a tomato-based sauce, like a soupy sauce that we're going to cover over the cabbage rolls as they bake. Okay, take these out since these should be nice. They've got a nice kind of vibrant green color to them, so they should be well to work with. I'm going to kind of separate them so they cool off a little bit faster. Again, that's the more difficult part, is working with the hot cabbage leaves. Now you can always be patient and let them cool. But if you're like me, you just like to get dinner made. Now the stalk, the bigger heady part in here, this one's going to take a little bit longer, but since we cut into it, you should be able to pull off leaves every so often, just like this, as they separate off for this. Now, if you're going there and you can get one of those really big heads of cabbage, those make some pretty epic cabbage rolls, or Golabki, which is the Polish words for them. Krautwickel is the German one for it. I feel like these are just a pretty common, like, European food. I feel like, so my step grandmother taught me how to make them. She was, Polish, and this was my stepdad's favorite meal. And she would always make this for us when we'd go up and visit her in Minnesota. And then when I did my foreign exchange in Germany, my German family there, now this was we lived in this really small town, and she spoke a dialect of German. So I knew Hochdeutsch, which is like the more proper version of German, but she spoke this more southern dialect. So I didn't quite understand her as well. But she would always cook us, because you would go to school there, and then they didn't serve food at their school, so you always went home for lunch. And so on like certain days, we would go to her grandmother's house for lunch, and she'd always serve us on Tuesdays. She would serve us, it was always cabbage rolls on Tuesdays. We have our noodles, a quick stir. And I remember my foreign exchange student wasn't sure I was going to like them. And I was like, oh no, I love cabbage rolls. I've had them, lots of times, but they're not a super common food here in America, at least not now anymore, but they are delicious. Let's see. We'll let those boil a little bit more, but as you can see, I've got a good amount already forming here. So let's get our spices and our seasonings here in our meat while our cabbage continues to cook up. I've got some onion powder. This is going to give a really great savory flavor in it. We're going to use about a tablespoon. So a good shake over. And don't under season these, because you're seasoning up all the meat and all the rice. So you want to make sure you've got them well seasoned. And we're going to use some ground black pepper. I'm going to use about a teaspoon. So a couple good shakes over. And then I have some Mrs. Dash's table blend. I'm going to use about a teaspoon of that, which is kind of like an everything blend. So I'm going to use a mixture of this and a mixture of Italian seasoning. I'm going to use about a teaspoon of this. And then we're going to use some garlic salt. We're going to use about a tablespoon of garlic salt, because again, we've got to season up 2 pounds of meat and quite a bit of rice. So a couple good shakes over. We'll start, and then we'll go in just a second with our hands, but we'll start by giving it a good mix through. Pound over, but just want to check on my noodles and everything before. Once I'm in with my hands and invested, I don't want to have to go over here and tend to anything. I'm going to turn this down, my back noodles down just a little bit, and let them simmer, and then see if I can get any more off of my cabbage here. I'm going to actually turn off, because I think you grab a spatula here. We're going to just take this out. Now you always got to be careful, because this is full of hot water. Once when I was in high school, I remember making this, and I picked it up by this little stump, and it broke off into the boiling water, and it splashed up, and oh, it was so painful. We're going to put that right here, and then we should be able to pull those off in a little bit.
Question. Were both packs of meat ground beef, and is that cheese or rice with it?
They were both ground beef. They're actually like a butcher blend, so they're actually a mixed cuts of beef, so not just all like your typical ground beef, but you got chuck and whatnot in there. And then this is rice. So this is 1.5 cups of rice, dry rice, then cooked up. And then we have a can of diced tomatoes in here, and then our seasoning, so green onions, onion powder, garlic salt, black pepper, Mrs. Dash's table blend, and some Italian seasoning. So we're going to mix this up. I'm going to bring my little thing over here, because this is what we're going to put it in. We're going to mix up and make our base. But while this is doing, we need to stew up and make our sauce that we're going to kind of coat over our tomatoes in there. So I'm going to turn my pan on. We're going to make that in here. We're going to add in 2 cans of diced tomatoes.
use an egg with your mixture?
I do not use an egg with my mixture. It holds together just fine with the rice because the rice kind of pulls all the moisture in. And the way my step grandmother taught me was just plain as it is. It's not like a meatball, so you don't need that extra moisture in it. So we've got 2 cans of our diced tomatoes, and we're going to add in some tomato paste. You want about 2 tablespoons in here. So I'm going to give it a good squeeze because we're making almost like a chunky tomato soup base for this. And this is what we're going to pour over our our rolls, and that's what it's going to stew in. And then let me get 2 cups of water. I'm going to turn on my thing, and then we're going to add in a scoop of chicken bouillon. So my step grandmother, she used to actually make this with like Campbell's tomato soup. And so I've over the years have changed it to be a little bit more healthy and a little bit more fresh flavored on there. But I feel like that was like your typical like 1950s, 60s variation of it. But nice scoop of chicken bouillon in here. And we're going to mix this in here. We'll let this simmer for just a second. But it just makes it a little bit fresher. But we'll still give you that nice stewy flavor to it. Now you can also just pour like a can of diced tomatoes over it. That works well. But I do like to mix the chicken bouillon with it. I think it works really well. Let me give my noodles a little stir here. We'll let these cook up for our little cheesy mac. These noodles, I can still tell they still need a little bit more time. Okay, now it's time to go in full throttle with our hands. So we're just going to go in and kind of squeeze the mixture through until you've got it kind of all incorporated. Now, I find if you go too heavy on the rice, it's not going to hold together as well. So I always like to try to do equal parts of it for it. But you can also do more meat and less rice to it. But I try to find it's a little bit more balanced if you do half and half. And it makes it stretch a little bit more because rice is a lot more inexpensive than meat. You can also sub this out for different proteins, ground chicken, ground turkey. Those could all be subbed in here as well.
Oh, Paula sent you again.
Oh, well, thank you, Paula. We appreciate that. Okay, let's get these guys all fully mixed in. And you just want to make sure you don't have any big clumps where it's all rice in one area or all meat, because you want it to really be a cohesive mixture. You want those spices to all kind of work and be mixed together. But you see how just holding it together, that rice and the meat just works well, and it will keep it held together on its own. You don't need an egg at all to be a binder. Okay. Now here's the fun part. You're going to take your little cabbage leaves right here, and you're going to just take a nice scoop of meat. And you put it, I always put it at the firm base, right where the little stalk part is. And then you're going to tuck them in, and then you kind of just roll it up over, and you've got your little cabbage roll. We're going to put them in our little baking dish here. And then what we'll do is we'll cover them over with our little tomato base that we have made. And then a little thing that my step-grandmother always did was she put strips of bacon over the top. Now, I've seen it where people will wrap each individual one with a strip of bacon, and I always felt like that was a bit much. So I always just lay strips of bacon over the top, because the flavor that bacon seeps into it just is really wonderful and makes it nice and rich and homey.
You have a question, is the cabbage cooked?
It is boiled all the way, but not a complete cook. We are going to be stewing it in this nice kind of tomato sauce kind of that we've made. And then we'll bake it in the oven. So that will kind of continue it, but it has kind of a quick boil on it so that it is malleable. You're able to kind of fold it and everything like that and work with it. Because if you try to do it with just raw cabbage, which I have tried, because I was like, oh, I wish we could just do it without having to, do the boiling part because it's such a pain sometimes. And you really, they'll break your lettuce or your cabbage leaves will just break when you try to do it. Now, towards the end, when you get down and you have smaller leaves, what you can do is you can double up your leaves. So you can use 2 cabbage leaves to make 1 cabbage roll.
And can you go over everything that's in the meat mixture?
Yes. So in here we have 2 pounds of ground beef, 1.5 cups of dried rice cooked up, a can of diced tomatoes, and then we added in about a tablespoon of onion powder, a tablespoon of garlic salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of Mrs. Dash's table blend, teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and yep, I think that is it. So we're going to do a middle row, and then we'll do our final one. Now, a lot of times when I make these, I make a lot of them at a time because I'll make a big batch, and then I send them and I will freeze them down for my stepdad because I tell you, this is his favorite meal. I make this for like Father's Day every year. I give him a big pack of Golabki and lots of trays, and then he can just pull them out of the freezer whenever he wants. Like before we went on our camping trip, actually both the summer camping trip and our fall camping trip, I made him these to keep him through the week and then have as little backups. So he has no idea that I'm making these. So he will be very, very happy when he comes over tonight. So, and they're so good. Now, if you want to go heavier on the vegetable side, you can also just double them up as I want more vegetables, I want more cabbage. I personally love them that way, but I find that everybody else tends to like them just the single leaves. My mom and I, we both love the doubled up, but we love cabbage. So we're going to break off and get to our more dainty leaves.
What temperature and how long do you cook them for?
So I'm going to be cooking these at the same time as my sourdough. So on that second batch, which is going to be at 450, we're going to cook them underneath them. So they need to cook for roughly, with the 450, they're going to be a little bit shorter time. So probably like 20 or so minutes. But typically I do 350 for about 45 minutes for it to stew the cabbage a bit more. Okay, we're gonna have to take a little itty bitty break because our sourdough is ready here.
And what kind of rice did you use? And is it raw or pre-cooked?
So the rice is just a basmati rice, and I cooked it up, and then I just let it cool a little bit so that it wasn't super hot to work with for it. But I've also just cooked it up and put it in while it's hot. Either one works with it. Now, if you ever use the big cabbages with the jumbo leaves and you make really big golabki, those do take much longer to bake than the smaller ones. And so because you're having a bigger mass of meat and you have to cook the meat all the way through for it. But if you make the smaller ones, they do cook a little bit faster. So let's take out our sourdough loaves. We've had these baking at 500 with the lid on. We've got our cinnamon swirl. You can see those cinnamon poking out there. And then this is our cheese, our Gruyere and black pepper. I'm going to slide this over here. We'll pop these guys back in. And then we're going to turn our temperature down to 450. There we go. And oven cancel 450. So we do with the lid at 500, which is the Dutch oven, kind of protects the heat. And then with the lid off at 450, and then we'll do it for 20 minutes. This is going to help give it a nice golden crust for it as well. Okay, that is getting up there. Let's see. Let's get our noodles out because I think these are, yep, they are done.
If you weren't baking sourdough, at what temperature, how long would you cook the Golabki for?
So I typically would bake them at around 350 for 45 minutes on there for it, because that's typically like kind of the good temperature for this. Dutch oven's a little hot, so let me pull these up. We're going to strain these. There we go. Let this sit to the side for just a second until we're ready for our noodles for our mac and cheese. Okay. Let's get these finished up. That way we can get them popped up in the oven and going. Now, a lot of times, you know, I find like I'll make these in little loaf pans, and you can have like lots of little loaf pans filled up, pop them in the freezer because they do reheat really well. The broccoli not the broccoli, the cauliflower. Gosh, I can't even say the right thing. The cabbage really does stew up and hold together really, really well for this. For it. I'm gonna see if we can break off some more of this on here. There we go. Pull off more of these little leaves. That way we can make these last few ones. But when they get down to the really little ones, you can just double wrap them if you can't get around, so you don't have to have a teeny tiny little itty bitty one. But as you can see, as we get down there, you see it's still firm because it didn't boil all the way through, although we won't have enough meat when we get down there anyways, because we've got enough to make a few more. Trick is, can I squeeze the last little bit in here? We've got this one to go right here, and I think I can squeeze one more on each side, which should be perfect because I think I have enough to make exactly 2. We'll double wrap this guy since we have that cabbage down. And there we go. Easy peasy. And now we have, nice thing about this soup also being nice and pre-boiled like this, it's going to help start that cooking process up for it. So we've got our Golabki all stuffed in there. And I'm going to take my tomato soup base here, and we're going to pour over what we can over it.
You have a question. Is this recipe posted anywhere?
We'll post a live video to our stream on a link on our page, so you can always rewatch to recook this meal for it. But you know what? I feel like this is always such a hit with people because it is more of a unique meal that's more old-fashioned, that maybe I will make this into a recipe card for our members on there. But I always post our lives, so they're always available to be rewatched. But we're going to ladle this over, and then we're going to place our strings of bacon on top of this for it, and then we'll pop this in the oven to kind of cook up. Here we go.
And can you go over what you're pouring on it?
So yes, this is our diced tomatoes, 2 cans of diced tomatoes, about 2 cups of water with a nice big scoop of chicken bouillon in it, so it has some great flavor to it. And this is what we're going to stew our tomatoes in, or our Golabki in. So it's got a nice flavoring to it. Beautiful. I don't want to go too high because it will boil some, and I don't want it to boil over. I think we can get the last of these little diced tomatoes on the top there. think we should be good with that. But you want enough to cover up over to keep these the cabbage rolls nice and tender and get the seasoned flavor on it. And then for our bacon, let's see, we'll keep them long. Sometimes I will cut the strips in half depending on what size. When I'm in the loaf pans, I'll cut my strips in half. That way I can fit them all in there. But with this, I can keep them long. I'm not going to use all of this because you don't need a whole lot of bacon to give you that flavor, but a little bit of bacon goes a long way to give you just a nice bit of richness to it. So I'm going to grab out a couple strips of bacon. So we'll have that saved for another day. And we're just going to lay them over the top, and the oven will kind of crisp it up a little bit, but it will seep its juices down into it and just give a really great flavor to everything. And then we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of black pepper and garlic salt over the top of this, and we'll pop it in the oven to kind of cook up. Oop. Realize I left that burner on. I'm going to have to give that a quick scrub. Okay. So just a light sprinkle over the top of garlic salt. And then a light sprinkle of black pepper. There we go. And then we're going to go pop this in the oven, and we will let this roast up and cook up on here for this. And I'm doing it in like a smaller Dutch oven, but you can do it in your bigger ones. You don't want to seal it off with a lid. You want to keep it open so that bacon can kind of crisp up. I'm going to slide it right underneath here on this level. The Dutch ovens on top will kind of protect it from that heat, that direct heat. But when we take it out, they'll get a few extra minutes on. I'll bring them up top and they'll get a little bit extra of that top heat for it. Okay, let's start on, we've got our mac and cheese and our things. I'm going to just give this a quick rinse because I left it in the heat on. So I've got to let it rinse out real quick for it. That way we don't taste burnt stuff in our thing. Apparently when I took the pasta off, I left it on. There we go. And then we'll make our mac and cheese. We've got our caramelized carrots and onions that we'll whip up here in just a second. Okay. We don't need our head of cabbage anymore. So you could always saute it up if you want to. Since it's already kind of partially boiled, it actually will saute up really well for it. But I like to keep it, none of my kids are a big fan of it, so I don't really like to keep it that much. Let's get our caramelized carrots and onions going here. We're going to add in a splash of olive oil, and we'll let them start to saute up. We'll start with our onions, and then we'll get our carrots going. We'll add in some garlic. There we go. So I told you earlier I was running low on onions. So I have like the smallest onion ever, but it will make do. We're going to do nice and long, skinny slices on our onion to kind of match our carrots on there. And I've got some baby carrots and then some leftover ones. And we'll slice them up. We'll quarter them because we don't want them too thick, so they'll get nice and tender for this. It is. I always going to say, this is such a small onion. Normally, I always have like the biggest produce ever because I'm always like, I want to use, we're a large family. So I'm like, I want to use one onion instead of multiple. This is like the smallest, but this is my last onion in the house. I said, tomorrow's grocery day. So, I always got to make it to the Monday. And apparently I used a lot of onions this week. And this tiny one is what I'm left with.
Have you ever used beef tallow?
Yes, I have used it. Actually, it was funny because my husband and I have been talking about it because my brother-in-law uses beef towel and it is so delicious. And we keep saying, I'm like, oh, you should really, get some and work with it because it does give this nice, really great savory flavor and is wonderful. I just haven't bought any. I just need to because it's not something that I can find at my grocery store. It's something I have to order online, but I do love it for it. Okay, for our mac and cheese today, I'm gonna do something slightly different than my where I make a bechamel sauce. We're gonna do kind of a butter and cream base to it. Then we'll add in our cheese and whatnot. So it won't be. I have a feeling this is all gonna get eaten up really quickly today instead of one where I need it to sit through to the next day. So it's gonna be more of a creamy, cheesy mac and cheese, but not with a bechamel base, which is where you make a roux and add flour in it. It's just going to be thickened up through the cream and the cheese. But we're going to start with about 4 tablespoons of butter because I think that's all we need with that amount of noodles. We're going to let it melt. Then we're going to add in our heavy cream. And then I'm going to grate up some of my cheeses that we have for this. But while that is melting, I'm going to turn my heat on over a lower temperature. I'm going to get our carrots prepped up, and then we got to get our garlic prepped up as well. So get a good bit of garlic here for this. And I've got just some random carrots that we're going to use up on a bag of rainbow carrots. These actually ones are fairly rainbow compared to some of the rainbow carrots that I've gotten recently. So we're going to slice them up. We're going to quarter them because they are too thick. If you leave them this way, they'll be too thick for our dish and they won't get soft. So we're going to quarter them. That way they'll be nice and soft when we kind of cut through them. Or tender, I should say, a tender crisp. Otherwise, you'll get just really firm carrots that won't be lovely. On here. Let's get these guys out. Now, if you don't want to have to prep your carrots up and have to cut them, at the grocery store, you can buy these carrots that are fresh carrots, but they're called microwavable carrots. So they're like really tiny baby carrots. And they actually work really, really well for this dish because you can saute them up and they will get nice and tender without having to cut them in half. And so a lot of times if I don't have time to do a lot of prep on my dish and I'm going to make that, I'll get those carrots. But of course, anytime something's been at the stores, done a little extra work for you, they cost an extra, extra penny or two. It's just like cut up fruit. If you want them to cut it up for you, you're going to pay double. And we'll get these guys going. I'm going to give my onions a nice little stir here. I want a nice kind of caramelized, kind of crispy onion. And then we're going to we'll add in our garlic. We'll let that crisp up. And then we'll add in our carrots. And then towards the end, we'll add in just a little bit of butter and for our brown sugar to have and make a nice kind of sweetened brown sugar sauce to it. Not too much, but just a little bit to help it out. There we go. Turn it down just a smidge. Okay, we've got our butter melting here nicely. And now I'm going to add in my cream. And what we're essentially going to do is you're going to kind of reduce the cream into a sauce so it thickens it up. And that's what's going to be the base of our mac and cheese. So it's a little bit different than, the bechamel way where you make the roux, you add in the milk, and then you add in the cheese. This way works really great if you're going to eat all of your mac and cheese the same day because this The next day, your mac and cheese is very firm because then the cheese and the cream all solidifies. Versus if you make a bechamel with that, you have a creamier mac and cheese the next day because that flour-based sauce doesn't firm up.
How much cream did you add?
I added about, I want to say, a half a cup maybe in there with the 4 tablespoons of butter. Let's get our garlic. I'm going to stop slicing up our carrots and get our butter going. And
can you go over what Golabki is?
Golabki is the Polish name for cabbage rolls. And so we're having our cabbage rolls that are stuffed with ground beef, rice, and tomatoes, seasoned up. And so there's just kind of like a complete little dish where that cabbage is almost holds the rice and the meat together. And it's just lovely. And then they're baked in like a tomato sauce, so they're almost stewed together, and it's really, really lovely on there. And I find that the tomato-based sauce also takes away, a lot of people don't like cabbage because it has a strong flavor, but that tomato sauce really brings in another strong flavor that works to mellow out the cabbage flavor, which I think makes it really, really lovely. And it's just one of those dishes that I feel like, for me, it just brings back a lot of memories from my childhood and going and visiting my step-grandparents in Minneapolis. And they always made this, and it was just one of my favorite meals there. That and Rice Krispie treats and buttered toast. They always made the best buttered toast. But I absolutely love this meal for it. We're going to add in just a smidge more olive oil on here. There we go. We'll let this kind of crisp up, and then we'll start getting our carrots in here so they can start to saute. Let's give our cream and our butter here.
You have a question. So what made the buttered toast so good?
You know what? It took me years to realize I never understood why the buttered toast was so good. It was because I grew up in a household where my mom put the butter in the fridge. So we never had nice room temperature butter growing up. And I never knew that people put their butter out on the counter until I met my husband, and his family was the butter on the counter, or they kept it in the cupboard. And that makes a huge difference in the butter toast. And I'm guessing that's what she did and she had just like the good old white bread. And my mom was always like very healthy, so we had like wheat bread growing up. So I think it was the nice soft butter with the white bread that just made it so wonderful. And whenever I would go up there, there was this one bakery in Minneapolis area, like the Brooklyn Park there, that had this rainbow bread. And I would get the rainbow bread there, which was just a white bread, but it was rainbow and colorful and fun. And when you're a kid, when anything's fun and colorful, it's instantly better. So when they had that was like the world's best, bread ever. So I think, it was wonderful because of that. And because she made it for me. Growing up, if I wanted toast, I made it myself. She made me the toast. So I guess maybe there was a lot of contributing factors to it, It was just like their root beer floats. I would always go there, and they would, my grandmother would make me a root beer float. And it was just, good old like A&W root beer with a scoop of vanilla ice cream on it. But man, those are the best root beer floats that I can ever remember. I've never been able to make a root beer float as good as those. But, I think those are just your fond memories of childhood. It's also, I remember we'd play lawn darts out there. Those have been banned, apparently. But just those, like, fun things that you would do. There was a place called Circus, which was like a Chuck E. Cheese, and we'd go and do that. It was always just fun, and go to the lakes, go fishing, You're always going to reminisce. All right, let's get our carrots in here. I think I got them all. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 in here that I missed like usual. But let's get our carrots going so they can start to get nice and tender. We'll give them a nice coating, and then we're going to pop our lid on so that they can kind of do a nice steam cook in here. There. Kind of coat them up with all of that nice little onion and that garlic oil. And then I'm going to pop my lid on here. Where is it? That's one thing I do love about the Hexclad pans is they have these lids so you can see everything and they steam out. Okay, let me grab our sourdough is ready to come out. So I'm going to go grab that. I'm going to clear this off and then we can finish up our mac and cheese. We'll move our Golabki up so that can finish baking off and we'll be about ready here in a few minutes. I'm going to move these guys over here.
Do your kids ever complain about what's for dinner?
I have
Really just one.
It's just one. I have one that is a perpetual. I can cook very rarely can I cook a meal that she loves. There are a few. She loves spaghetti and meatball night and salmon, steak, spam fried rice. She likes that. But for the majority of the things, she's a complainer. She's got some weird taste buds. She wants the same things. But for the most part, you know, I mean, they all complain that I don't do steak enough and stuff like that, but they're not too bad. I'm going to move this up here, get that going, and I'm going to switch here from 450 to air fry, which is actually going to allow that bacon to crisp up a little bit faster.
You have a question. Is she a teenager?
And she's a teeny bopper. She's 10 years old, and I have found that 10 is a very difficult age in this house. It is the most difficult age so far. Now, I mean, I have a 15, soon to be 16-year-old, and I have a 14-year-old, but man, for all of my kids, 10 was hard. So much attitude with 10. And maybe because it's them out of being less helpful. So this is our Gruyere and black pepper on there, nice kind of golden brown. You can actually see the nice kind of cheesy bits here popping through. These are my more mini loaves that I've been making here. And then this one is my cinnamon swirl on it. I'll put that up. Beautiful, nice, lovely, gorgeous on it. But oh, I can smell, they both smell wonderful. The cheese in one is popping and the cinnamon smell. So they'll be kind of a perfect sweet, savory. She always loves the sourdough, so that's always nice. She'll like the noodles and she'll eat the inside of the Golabki, which is, so growing up, we always called them Golabki. That's what the things, but it's actually Golabki is the name. But, you know, and it's funny because the way even my stepdad spells it, he spells it Gulmy. It's really funny how he spells it too. And I'm like, that's not even nowhere how to spell it.
There's been a lot of comments that they grew up saying Golabki too.
And maybe that's just the way it is because maybe that's like the dialect because that's how they always said it. And then I looked it up and I was like, because I tried to find it one day and I'm like, no, this is how I spelled it. It must be that they were saying it wrong all of these years for it. Okay, let's grate some cheese in here. We're going to get our noodles going and then we should be about ready. I need my scissors here. So I've got a couple cheeses. I've got an Italian-inspired cheese, which is similar to Asiago. I've got a Parmesan here, and then a Parmesan Gruyere, and then a mozzarella. So we're going to grate a couple of these in here. We'll mix it up, and then we'll add some more once we have our noodles in. We'll add some garlic salt on there. But our cream sauce is already pretty thick on it. I've got my temperature really low. You never want to do it super high when you have cream or cheese because what you'll end up doing is just scalding your cream or burning your cheese. So keep it lower, low and slow for it. I'm sorry, but this cheese smells so wonderful. This cheesy bread, you can see right here on it, this like cheese is all like bubbling out and it just smells really, really wonderful. Right now, I'm like, it just smells so good. I can't wait to take a bite of it because it does smell really good. Okay, we've got, this is our Parmesan Gruyere. Get a little bit of this in here. We're doing a little and little, and then I mix my noodles in, and then I add some more. So it's kind of, you make kind of a base, then you add some in on it, and then we'll add more. And then we'll add a topping. Look at that. We're going to add a little bit of our mozzarella. So just a slightly different mac and cheese. I don't have any fresh mozzarella, otherwise I would mix that in there, but this will do. Okay. Perfect. You can see I've got nice, look how thick this sauce is forming already. Look at that nice cheese pull on it. Wonderful. Okay, let's mix in our noodles. Even though they're stuck together, they will come out, and I missed the mark on here, but once we get them in the cheese sauce, they'll fall apart and come together.
I do have a question. How much would a loaf of sourdough cost?
Oh, if you buy it from the store, I mean, honestly, I've seen them sold from so many different prices. I don't sell my loaves to people. I give them to my friends or my family, but I don't sell my loaves for it. I'm not like a commercial baker type thing for it.
We've seen them for like 10 or 12.
Oh yeah, I've seen them easily 10, sometimes $15. I mean, it depends, you know, where you're buying them from. You know, I think at a grocery store, you're going to get them cheaper than if you get them at a farmer's market, because you're paying, it's a different labor market that you're essentially paying for.
And you priced it, what it cost you?
To make my sourdough loaves, just a traditional loaf, I can make this sourdough loaf right there for like $1.25, just if I were to price out the ingredients. It doesn't take me hardly any money. That's using bread, because it's, you know, sourdough is just made from bread flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter. So it's hardly any, you know, ingredients in there. Let me grab, I'll use this one. Let's coat up our noodles. There we go. Look at that delicious cheesy base here. Turn my temperature down really low. I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic salt. Look how delicious and cheesy this is. I'm going to add a splash more cream. Just a little drizzle over the top. And now let's season it up. And then let's get on our carrots here. And then what we'll do is we'll mix this in, and then I'm going to grate a little cheese over the top, and then we can pop this in the oven to get that nice little bubble crust on top of it for it, and then we'll finish off our carrots. And then everything else should be about done. Look at that. Delicious. Oh, man overboard. Wonderful. Okay, pop that down. Let's get this nice little stirring here. This is the nice thing that's wonderful about the lid. It really helps speed up the process. It keeps that steam in there. That helps cook them up a little bit faster. There we go. Nice little stir. Let's grate our cheeses over the top. We're going to get them on here, and then we'll be about ready to finish up our carrots and serve it. Because you've got to have a nice cheese crust. If you love a little breadcrumb, just toss about, you know, I would say like a fourth a cup of breadcrumb and about a tablespoon of melted butter with a little bit of garlic salt and Italian seasoning, and you can sprinkle that over the top. I'm just going to keep it simple for my kids today. This is more for my, as I said, my complainer, my 10-year-old on there, so that she will be happy. And I will say my oldest son, actually everybody loves mac and cheese in this family, variations of it. I always change it up. I don't try to make the same mac and cheese. I always like to use different variations of it. But just a light topping of cheese over the top. And then we're going to just do a light sprinkle of garlic salt. And then we'll slide this in the oven. We can take a peek at our Golabki and see how it is progressing. And see if we need to go up there. Oh, wonderful. It actually is almost ready to come out. Look at that. We've got that beautiful, nice crispy up of the bacon. You see it stewing and bubbling there. Wonderful. Beautiful. Let me give this a nice little feel. Perfect. You know what I'm going to do is whenever you have it, the bacon looks perfect. I'm going to get a piece of aluminum foil and I'm going to tent over it. That's going to prevent the bacon from crisping up more, but still allow it to heat. So I'm going to grab this aluminum foil here. It's called tenting. So if you ever worry about pies or baked goods, like you're making bread and you don't want it to get burnt, but it needs to cook longer, take a sheet of aluminum foil and lightly put it over the top. But my bacon is perfect and crispy on the top. That's from that air fryer setting at the last bit. And put it right there. Wonderful. So that will need about 5 minutes for max for the cheese to boil up, not even. By the time we're done with our carrots here, we will be ready for them to come out. Let me just move this out of the way. Let me grab my brown sugar over here. And we're done with this. And I need a little bit of butter. So we have our carrots and I add a little, do I have any over here? Or did I use it all? I used it all. I have my butter with, we start it with olive oil and then we add a little bit of butter with our brown sugar to make our kind of our caramelized base to it. So look at that nice moisture coming off. Our carrots are starting to get a little bit more translucent. You can kind of start to see a little bit more, they're less opaque in there, and they've got a little bit more flexibility when you move with them. You don't want them to be mushy, but you want them to be tender. Like I always say, tender, crisp. More. So what we're going to do in the middle here, we're going to add a little bit of butter. You don't need a whole lot, just about a tablespoon. We're going to let that melt down. And then let me grab a spoon, and then we're going to add in our butter. Or not our butter, our brown sugar. And I'm going to sprinkle this around. We're going to probably do 2 little sprinkles full, because this is not a packed tablespoon, but you want about a packed tablespoon of brown sugar. And then a nice little sprinkle of garlic salt. It's that sweet and savory that work really well in this dish. And then you're just going to mix it up together. That butter and that sugar together are going to create this really wonderful kind of sticky glaze that will stick onto those carrots, that will really cling to it. But then you have that garlic salt that gives you a little bit of that savory flavor. They're not overly sweet, which I really love about them, because I'm not a super sweet person when it comes to like my main dishes. I like my desserts, but I don't like my main food to be sweet. This is a nice kind of base for it. I'm going to turn those off because they're ready. Let's go. I'm going to grab our Golabki out of the oven, and then we can go grab our mac and cheese. Let me grab we can put it, I'll grab a trivet here to put it on. And then we can grab our mac and cheese, because that should be just about done. And then we'll be ready to serve up. So we've got our tenting off, which prevents the bacon from continuing to cook. And I've got to be careful with this because, again, it's filled to the top with that lovely stewed tomato juice. There we go. So here are our Golabki with our bacon on top. I'm going to go grab our mac and cheese out of the oven, which is perfect. The cheese is nice and melted and gooey and wonderful. Okay, let me grab our cutting board and we can get ready to serve up. And then I'll grab our sourdoughs over here. We've got our one with dinner and our one is kind of our dessert sourdough. Will be delicious. The cinnamon swirl is one of our it's a favorite because it's just that perfect amount of sweetness without being overly sweet. Okay. Let's get ready to serve up. Okay. For dinner today, we have our Golabki, which is our cabbage rolls that we have stuffed with ground beef and rice and our nice stewed tomato sauce. We have them topped with bacon and they're seasoned with onion powder, garlic, salt, spices, and they're just this terrific dish that kind of screams, you know, comfort food from my grandparents' house back in the day. We're serving them with our caramelized carrots and onions with a touch of brown sugar for that sweetness, and then our Italian mac and cheese with our creamy shells. We used mozzarella, Asiago cheese, and Gruyere for this delicious kind of cheesy mac and cheese. And then we'll be serving them with a slice of our Gruyere and black pepper sourdough bread. And then for dessert, we'll have a slice of our cinnamon swirl sourdough. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. We've got our cabbage rolls, our Golabki, and our mac and cheese, caramelized carrots, and sourdough, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Dutch ovens, my hex-clad pans, all the different things that I use in my kitchen. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Do you ever request to cut into the bread?
You know what? They have sat here long enough, so we should be able to cut into these. Okay, let me bring over here. So this is my cinnamon swirl for it. Nice swirls of cinnamon throughout. That's what we did in the lamination process. Still steaming hot, but delicious. Let me wipe my knife because I don't want any cinnamon on here. And then this is steaming hot. Our cheesy one with our black pepper in there. You can see, look at all that melted cheese in there. Just so delicious with black pepper swirls and hot. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.